Teenagers are no longer merely adolescents. Today, they are well on the way to becoming a distinctive social class.
The 1950s marked a time of prosper in the United States. The absence of war allowed teenagers to focus on themselves, slowly puzzling together pieces of their own identities. The youth of this time period are often labeled as the luckiest generation. These men and women can be attributed to the immersion of modern teen culture. For the first time, those stuck in the angsty period between childhood and adulthood began determining trends in fashion and media. Throughout time, different generations of youth have passed through their teenage years, cementing themselves into adult society as they begin to raise their own kids, new generations of teenagers. And as the cycle progresses, the life of a modern teenager continues to morph with societal standards. Teenage years have always been viewed as a transitional period embodied with rebellion, confusion, and an overall search for identity. It's interesting to glance back at how former generations of teenagers lived, because while an overall theme of development continues to persist, teenagers today live completely different lives than they did even 10 years ago.
The life of a modern teenager is a confusing, challenging, and yet wonderful one. The expectation set forth for the current generation of teenagers is unlike anything that those older in our society have ever experienced before. It is also often difficult for the average adult to connect with or even understand the modern teenager due to the overgeneralized negative stigmas associated with our present-day youth. Teenagers today are perceived most often as reckless, naive, hormonal, and lacking in genuine human relationships. While some of these stigmas can be understood, what adults aren't seeing is passion, innovation, and abundance of creativity. The story depicted in Looking for Alaska is complicated, exciting, unsettling, and most importantly, completely authentic in its truth to what exactly is the life of a modern teenager. Today we see that teenagers are expected to grow up so much faster than they ever have before. At the middle school level, we are taught to start planning for our careers even before we know what exactly it is that we truly care about in this world. And since the teenage years are a time of so much uncertainty, these young adults often find themselves lost and quick to turn away from what they have been taught when they were kids. Teens begin to experience all of the different paths that society makes available to them. This is what Professor Dr. Hyde in Looking for Alaska relays to the kids in his class by enlightening them on the various alternative routes that they may eventually pursue for themselves. However, due to such uncertainty and confusion during these years, mental health awareness has become increasingly more and more prevalent in order to understand our modern teenagers. Teens are faced with so much judgment, pain, and often isolation that it sadly becomes so easy for people to feel at loss for purpose anymore. We also see in this story how exactly various quirky personality types come together to form a bond similar to what many teenagers experience as we try and figure out who exactly our people will be in our lives. The exposure that Pudge has to things he had never tried before when he comes to Culver Creek boarding school almost exactly parallels the experiences of a freshman entering high school for the very first time. He is tempted with smoking, drugs, drinking, beautiful girls, risky pranks, and late-night adventures that his knowledge of say no to peer pressure had not prepared him for. And even though there is significant importance behind teenagers quickly having to make these choices in order to keep themselves safe, this very exposure to new possibility is considerably the most exciting aspect of these transforming few years, which is exactly what Looking for Alaska is able to depict as we, the reader, take a look into the genuine life of a modern teenager.